am going to a Scottish restaurant called The Haven with my children, and who are really not very childlike anymore. They've grown up. And one could order the haggis if one wanted to. I did once, and it's very good for haggis, but it's still haggis.
Still haggis.
It's still. And when I went with my friends for my birthday this year to the Haven, and we sat next to some people, and we started denigrating haggis.
Ooh,
And
dude.
the woman next to me, the table next to us, was there with, I swear it was like 6-year-old child, and she was like giving me the sign like to shut up, because and then she said and pointed to her kid, he loves haggis.
That's right.
So we buttoned our lip.
That's right.
And then we unbuttoned it in order to consume some delicious beers.
No, but you don't diss the haggis when you're at a Scottish restaurant. It's like, I hate pizza. Go to an Italian restaurant, pizza sucks. It's like,
pizza, pasta. What's with this tomato crap?
Yeah, come on. Did you buy a hamburger or something like that? Real food around here?
I don't want any raw goo on my food.
That's right.
So we consumed some media. We went highbrow on this one. Some Tchaikovsky, some Stravinsky, and Petrushka.
Yep.
And the Rites of Spring.
Yep.
And Tchaikovsky now was the first one that I consumed, and I can't remember which one that. This was all ballet music.
No, not Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky is Symphony 4. It's Tchaikovsky's Symphony 4.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But all the same conductor.
Michael Tilson Thomas.
Name. Yeah.
So what did you think of? Yeah. I'm fascinated because this is sort of like a world that I swim in. You know, I love this stuff. What did you think? I mean,
well, I have to say, I know you don't like it, but I've always liked the Rites of Spring, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed it, and I really liked watching the preparation. This was a long video that kind of went through kind of what went into the Rites of Spring, and also the history of it and the initial reaction to it, which was, of course, fantastic. It's like, I don't know. It's as if the Sex Pistols.
It is. It's exactly. It's
at your mother's birthday party, right?
Yeah. No, but my microphone's running really hot. Let me crank it down a little bit here if I can figure out how to do this for the back. Okay. Well, it's flashing red and yellow on my side. Hang on a second.
But the interface has changed here. Mine is all red, but I'm not hearing any distortion on the line. I think we're all right.
Serge Diaghilev was definitely the Malcolm McLaren of 1910. He knew.
Yeah.
He knew that he was going to cause a riot. He knew it. And so I think that was, But anyway, what I recommended to Jim was several episodes of a series that was done by Michael Tilson Thomas, who just passed away about a month ago.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why I got reinterested in Mike, because he passed away. And so I started revisiting. I didn't know that. There's a series called Keeping Score. And it's every episode is about 2 hours. The first hour is all the preparation and the background for a particular piece. And then the second hour is the actual performance, a full performance of the piece. So Jim watched the episode on Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony. So the first hour is, sort of a documentary, which includes some biography of Tchaikovsky but the thing that I love about those things is that he includes all the musicians from the orchestra. He pulls various musicians in and introduces them and shows what their contribution is, and they're great. I love them. It's just great seeing them and his stuff. So that's sort of the structure that Jim watched.
And I really liked the preparation for the Tchaikovsky piece, because it really showed him, in his office, kind of pacing around like a maniac, kind of getting into the mindset of Tchaikovsky and into the piece, playing on the piano, singing to himself. That was really interesting, because I never really thought about just what it takes to prepare a piece like that if you're a conductor. And it was like a month, before he had to get ready
And
for
this is
about
a
a
war
month before
horse.
he could.
This is not some experimental
Yeah,
thing you're meeting for the first time. The
yeah,
Tchaikovsky 4, as he mentions, is a war horse. It's a piece that's been performed many, 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 many times. He has his own score of it. He has an
right.
ass kicking library. Did you see that library that he had? That music,
Yeah,
whoa!
yeah.
And his whole apartment is just to
It was really
die
beautiful.
for.
Yeah, it was really
It's
beautiful.
like if you went to Chat GPT and said, "Design for me the perfect San Francisco highbrow
Yes,
art apartment," you couldn't do any better. It's got the
100%.
yeah, it's got the what is it the craftsman furniture. Oh my god. Anyway, I digress. He certainly didn't deny himself many things. It was a
No,
beautiful. But
no.
anyway, so okay, so what else? What else interests you about this?
I mean, Petrushka, I found really interesting. It's funny though because if I before I read about what Petrushka was about, I once again just returned to this sense that Stravinsky is obsessed with nature. Um, and although this is about a carnival, I just couldn't help kind of hearing nature themes throughout Petrushka.
Oh,
Um, and so I'm like, oh, it's birds, you know, in the
oh,
beginning.
certainly at the beginning it
Um,
sounds like birds, although it's meant to be a
yeah,
fair in St.
right.
Petersburg. It's supposed to be, I mean, you can read the Wikipedia article, it's supposed to be the cries of the
Yep.
hawkers and the vendors yelling and stuff like that. But yeah, it sounds like birds. Da-da,
It
da-da, da-da,
does.
da-da, 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 and everything's sort of out of rhythm, like nothing,
Yep.
it feels like birds because they're not paying attention to the bar lines at all.
Yeah. And this wonderful dissonance that arises. And this is still before I really understood that it was a carnival. The kind of trumpeting, the trumpet section comes in with kind of a fanfare, but there's that dissonance, and I interpreted that as being a kind of arrival of hawks or
Really?
predators. Yeah, I heard it in a really different way than it was intended, but I really enjoyed it that way. The dynamics are intense too. I mean, seriously, if you have any hearing loss, it's a problem. That piece. It's like
Why?
super, super quiet, and then really loud, and then super quiet.
Yeah.
More even so than Rites of Spring. The Rites of Spring, am I saying?
Right,
Rite of
it's
Spring?
singular. It's
The Rite
Sacre
of
Sacre du
Spring.
Printemps. It's singular,
Yeah,
rite of spring, I think. That's what I've always been taught.
yeah.
Now the interesting
And
thing
that
go ahead.
yeah.
You go ahead.
No, and that one is much more familiar to me, of course. So, um, and I mean, I love that, and it reminds me in a weird way. It reminds me of Gershwin, um, of kind of his song that almost evokes a complete picture of Manhattan at one time. The Rite of Spring, I know, is about kind of pagan rituals. Again, it's human focused, but I hear it very much as being nature focused. Um,
The opening
yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
is nature focused. That's why I love the opening more. That opening bassoon lick and all that stuff like that, and all that stuff. It sounds like spring. It sounds like all of a sudden the birds have arrived and they're all singing in
right.
different pitches and in different rhythms and in different locations.
Cacophony, but a beautiful cacophony,
And yeah, that's why it
but the
surprised me.
theme
What theme?
the theme is taken directly from a Russian
Yeah,
folk song, and yeah, which then that of course changes it, and yet I still hear it as this kind of commentary on nature, which is sort of more appropriate for the Rite of
it
Spring
is.
than for Petrushka. Um, but that was really interesting in the lead up to their actually playing it. That was a really interesting uh, a bit of information to understand that Stravinsky was trying to go back into kind of a pre Russian society,
Right.
uh,
Pre-Christian.
peasant world,
Yeah,
pre-Christian peasant
pre-Christian
world. Yeah,
Russian, rural, folk thing. And yeah, that's what he was trying to. Oh yeah, he used folk tunes all the time. I mean, he drew heavily in both Petrushka and in
Hmm.
Rite of Spring. He drew on folk tunes a lot. And also the other interesting thing that they mentioned, which is absolutely true, and they could have hammered this 10 times as loud, and that still would have been true. His one of his key mentors was Rimsky-Korsakov. And
Right. Right.
and you know, just to bloviate a bit, if somebody asked me what's the one piece of classical music you would tell somebody to listen to find out if they would like classical music, like what's the one piece of classical music you would recommend to anybody? And it'd definitely be Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov, which is such a fabulous piece, such a rockin' piece. One of the great things about it is that Rimsky-Korsakov is a ridiculous, over the top orchestrator. He's just amazing that he can make the
Yeah.
orchestra dance. And I think they pointed out that like Stravinsky stole just wholesale stole a lick from
Yes.
Rimsky-Korsakov's Mulata, which is probably fine. Rimsky's like, okay, go ahead, knock yourself out. Um,
Yeah, it happens a lot in classical music, in all music, really. I mean, I was also hearing it this time in terms of time signatures and in terms of chords, um, just from my own experience with music in terms of composing stuff myself. And that I think with Petrushka, that's really interesting, because you can hear the ways in which he's playing with your expectations for the chordal structures of the melodies that, what's underlying the melodies when you stack everything together, what do you get? And sometimes it's actually quite simple, and then suddenly there's like a new element, and then there's four new elements.
right.
And yeah, I'm picturing it on the guitar, I'm picturing it on the piano. um
Yeah,
and
there's the Petrushka chord, which is a C major
mhm,
superimposed with an F sharp major triad. You play a C major
right,
triad, C E G, and then you play F sharp, F sharp, A sharp, D sharp, and it creates this
it's fascinating.
wacky stacks. And you hear, and once
Yeah.
you, if you play that on a piano, then you listen to Petrushka, it's everywhere. He does it
Hmm.
all the time. Um, but yeah, it's now the thing that's fascinating to me is that he was basically writing Petrushka and Rite of Spring at the same time, and you can hear
Right.
where he used the same like. There's
Yes.
this thing that they talk about where it's I think it's a bass clarinet and a regular
Mhm.
clarinet. They're playing 2 octaves apart, and it creates
Yes.
this really good. He uses that exact same thing in both those pieces. I think there's a lot of other things. And what I find fascinating, that's not surprising because you're writing both
Right.
tunes at the same time. But what I find surprising is to my heart, I can't imagine two more different pieces of music because to me, Rite of Spring, I must be made of different stuff than everybody else on the planet because to me, the Rite of Spring is about menace. When I hear that music, I feel it's at best unsettling and unnerving, and at worst, it's really menace. It's threatening music. Um, Whereas Petrushka to me is just confetti. Petrushka is just okay, whatever, and it's hilarious. It's pratfalls and all that kind of stuff. And I just find what I find fascinating is that you create two pieces of music at the same time that share a lot of the same orchestration, that obviously share a lot of the same. Like you can tell it's the same guy,
Right.
but
Yeah, yeah.
they're so completely different at how they.
There are rhythmical motifs that come up in the two that are really close. The dun 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 dun. Um, and that kind of builds. I think in Rite of Spring, there's that feel kind of in some ways it's the rhythm even more than the chords.
Right.
Because there's certainly a lot of dissonance in Petrushka that kind of creeps in. You're combining, yeah, an F sharp with a C.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's just something I would never. An F sharp minor? Is he doing? Is
No,
an
I
F
think
sharp
it's
minor?
we
That
can hang on. Let me just say,
an F sharp
I think
triad?
it's an F sharp major triad superimposed on a G on a C natural C major triad. So let me just take a look. Petrushka chord.
That's crazy. Then you have the F and the F sharp right next to each other,
Um,
and the G. Yeah, it's
yeah, it's
satanic.
C major and F sharp major chord. So it's C E F sharp G, right? And then you
E
get the
F
B
sharp.
flat.
Oh, okay.
You get a B
Right, you don't
flat,
have the F and the F sharp,
but
it's the G
then
and
you've got
the
an
F
E
sharp, yeah.
flat and the E. So you have both the minor and the major
Yeah,
third of the C chord, which is the root, I think, or maybe it's the other
that's
way
wild.
around. But nevertheless, it's just kind of cool because it's just sort of like what, but it's nothing, that's not really radical. Everybody was doing wacky things and doing
Yeah,
stacked chords, and the jazz guys were doing it, and the second Viennese school with Schoenberg and Weber, they were doing it. So, but
right.
it's just he sticks it in your face. I mean, that's the thing
Yeah,
about See, the interesting thing about Stravinsky is that he's really there. Like the music is really there in your face. Um,
yeah,
and what I found fascinating by watching, especially the Rite of Spring presentation, is how the artists shine. You know, when you look at this, when you look at the Tchaikovsky, I think there's one lick that the piccolo, the lady with the piccolo, she says
yes.
29 notes that
She's
completely
like,
destroy your life.
I need to practice for like 5 years just to play that, like, it's 3 seconds
It's
long,
3 seconds,
it's, like,
29 notes in
nuts.
3 sec or
Yeah,
like
it's crazy.
2.7 seconds and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
when you look at the preparation for Rite of Spring, you got the percussion guy who says, "Yeah, I play 11 notes on the bass drum." He said, and this is probably the most famous 11 notes in all of percussion history. He says this
right,
is like it's in
right.
every audition. Um, but I mean, it's like throbbing in your face. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah, it's a
subtle at
rocking
all.
tune.
And when you
Yeah,
have
yeah, it's
and that open bassoon lick, like what they talked about, and the key
right,
thing is that, and
right.
Stravinsky was doing that, is that you're playing at the extreme upper range of the bassoon. It's like
That's right.
fretting on the high E string, like right against the top, and playing a melody up there. And that's what gives it that sort of very frail, lonely, slightly strangled sound. It's a beautiful sound. It's a gorgeous,
There's a there was a French composer in the audience, right, was
right.
quoted as
If
saying,
that's
like, "If that's a bassoon,
I'm a
then
baboon.
I'm a baboon."
Yeah,
Right.
that's Saint-Saëns, who's a great composer. He wrote The Carnival of the
Yes.
Animals and Night
Yeah,
and a lot of great pieces. I mean, he's a great composer. But yeah, people, not only are you asking the musicians to do wacky stuff with their instruments, like, but you're pushing them out in front. It's like,
yeah,
that's a tough lick, man, to open up an entire symphony, one person with, and you're playing at the top of your range.
right.
It's going to be
You
tense.
can't you can't ma and talking about, just the trouble with reed instruments and that they're never that you have to constantly adjust them and you have to constantly shave them down
Oh
and
yeah,
moisten them and, you know, they're really tricky.
they have
So,
altimeters. Like
yeah,
I talked to one person at the Curtis Institute of Music. He says, "Oh yeah," he said, on our phones we have an app that tells us precisely how high above sea level we are because that changes the tone of the reed. You cut the reed, and then you go up a couple of 100 feet, and it changes. I'm like, oh my
yeah.
god, can't you just become? Couldn't you just like run for Senate or do something a little less stressful? Couldn't you become like an emergency room trauma doctor? You probably
Right.
lead a lot more, peaceful life. But but going back to the thing, you had they were talking to the bassoon guy. They're talking to they talking to all the musicians. They're all talking about, oh, I love this thing. The cello and the bass guys are talking about, we have to play this really fast thing. We just have to keep it going. It's just it's really a musician's piece. It's really
Mhm.
about the music and the orchestra and the power it can project. Like, I'm going to take this orchestra and I'm going to floor the gas.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you, and I think that's why it's so exhilarating to the musicians. It's just like, we're in charge now. Like, we're going to make a big noise here.
For both of these pieces, was it the same orchestra, the New World Orchestra?
No,
No,
no, I
because
don't think it was the New
Petrushka,
World Orchestra.
I was floored by they how do you they sound I know they're supposed to sound like one big violin, right? But they really sound like everything vibrates exactly the same
Yeah.
in Petrushka on the strings, like otherworldly. I know that that's how it's supposed to go, but it was so much that I couldn't believe what I was
Because
hearing.
they spend 20 years doing
Yeah,
this.
Yeah. No,
I
it was just
mean,
I've never kind of been taken aback like that. I'm like, it just sounds like
these are
wonderful.
people who
It's
sit and rehearse
and
for 6 hours a day.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it's yeah, it's a wonderful, and it's great music that requires a great audience.
yeah.
I'm just a punter, but I
Oh,
can sort of
yeah,
see that, there are people who are really obsessed with this and who really they listen, they have different recordings, different performances of Petrushka. They like, they like, the Bernstein versus the Carillon or whatever, and
mhm,
those are great audiences because they go in there. And when somebody that when you have an audience that really knows the music and they stand up and they give you standing ovation, it must be a big freaking rush. I mean, it's a commitment on both the part of the musicians and the audience. Um, and it's a huge trip. But anyway, I digress. So you saw the Tchaikovsky, you saw
yeah,
the Rite of Spring, you saw
yeah.
Petrushka,
I
and
did.
uh, and the thing I
Tell me,
mentioned before, the part that I love, I'm sorry, the thing that I loved most, because I loved it because I didn't expect it at all, and it struck me so weird. And I mentioned it the last time is when he's doing the Tchaikovsky episode is much more about preparing for the performance,
yes,
and I
yeah.
really love it because
All the nuances. Everybody has to kind of talk through. I mean, the conductor is going to give, lives in it for a month and then talks through with the musicians, kind of like all the different notes and the emphasis and what he thinks Tchaikovsky meant in with this particular phrase. And they go through it just with a fine tooth comb. It's kind of beautiful to see the care that they put. It's like, don't just play the notes. It's like, he's scribbling on the staffs like,
yeah.
no, he means this, and it is an interpretation of a text. It's, what Roland Barthes would say, the text, the grain of the text. Um,
So he goes much more into like the details of the preparation, which there's two things about that I really love about that. Michael Tilson Thomas is really engaging. He's really
yeah,
trying to engage you. He's really trying to bring you into he's really trying to show you in a non-condescending way. It's great that Leonard Bernstein, stands there and tells you and stuff and things like that. But you never get there's always a distance between you and Leonard Bernstein. But he brings you into his house, um, and he shows you the details. And I love that scene where I almost want to cry, where he's standing just before he goes out on stage,
yeah,
and he's like counting. He's doing like a little ritual with his baton and stuff like that, and adjusting his
mhm,
stuff. And he walks out and he says, "This is the hardest part." He says, "Because I walk out and I turn to the audience and I welcome the audience, and then I have to turn around and face the musicians, and I have to be a completely different person." I heard that, I go, "Wow, that's so
yeah.
weird. What does that mean?" And the answer is it doesn't really matter what it means to a certain degree because you're never going to understand it because you're not a
No, I
conductor of the
mean,
San Francisco
such
Symphony.
a rare
But the fact that he bared his
role.
soul in
Yeah,
that way, the way that he gives you something that's really dense and really complex and probably very personal, but he gives it to you anyway, is I found very touching. Like he's really entrusting you. He's not playing you for a fool. He's saying, and like he brought in the music librarian, he showed the music librarian and all the processes and stuff like that. So I think keeping score of the series is a real gem. It's a little tedious, as it always is with these things.
it's long.
They're
It's
long.
but however, a lot of it stuck with me. Not everything, but um, yes. So yeah, I was like, oh, yeah, you're having me watch like 7 hours worth of videos, but it was also a treat, and I'm glad that I did it. It was not something that I would have watched on my own, and I realized that I have a lot to listen to with these pieces that I don't tend to live in, right? I love a really well written folk song. It's 3 minutes long. To tackle an and and wrestle with a piece like uh, Rite of Spring is a completely it's a completely different experience. And this really gave me kind of a window into what goes into the performance of it, which was great.
Yeah, it's cool. I like it because I think and the interesting, if you read about Mike himself, his parents were stars of the Yiddish theater. The original family name was Tomaszewski,
Mm,
and they were like, I think his grandfather was like a star of Yiddish theater. So he's coming from a tradition of people just banging on the piano and just belting out
yeah,
tunes.
yeah.
And he does that every now and then. There's one scene. He did another episode of Keeping Score where he's doing Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique. And there's one point where he just lets loose on the piano and starts joking around and starts hollering away. And so he's got that gene in him, which I think is really important. I think he has that gene in him, that much more sort of earthy gene of, yeah, we're gonna sing some slightly salacious tunes really, and we're gonna
Hmm.
play to a crowd, we're gonna play we're gonna go to the Catskills and play to people. And I think I think that's an interesting dimension. And he wrote, and I might watch it sometime, although it's way outside my usual can. He wrote, I think, something called like Meet the Tomaszewskis. It's like an opera or a play of some sort
Hmm.
to celebrate his parents and their grandparents. So he's very much in touch with that tradition of Yiddish theater, of just being a performer, of just like banging on a piano, not necessarily living your life in a in a conservatory, but this other tradition of, shut up and play your guitar kind of
Yeah, yeah.
attitude. So,
I, did, I mean, understanding. I'd never really thought of Stravinsky as kind of coming from a fascination of with folk music, and I mean that does really uh, make the whole experience of it richer. That he's in dialogue with traditional music of Russia and kind of a continuation and an expansion on the themes that come out of that. And I hadn't really thought, I mean, I know a lot of composers actually. I mean, intellectually, I know that a lot of composers do this, but I think listening to Rite of Spring that way is really kind of amazing.
well, there was a huge movement in the later half of the 1900s. One of the titanic tidal cultural waves in the late 1800s was the rediscovery of ye olde music.
Mhm.
And you had people going back to the Renaissance or to medieval music and recovering it. So you had people who were walking around and collecting folk tunes in England and all the countries of Europe. And what you have guys like Ottorino Respighi in Italy, who takes some Renaissance tunes and redoes them as ancient airs and dances. You have Ralph Vaughan Williams in England, who writes variations on a theme by Thomas Tallis. Thomas Tallis was a
Mhm.
church composer from, like, I don't know, the 1400s. I'm not exactly sure, but it's oldest musicus kind of stuff, as Bob would say, oldest musicus.
Oldest music is
And um, so you have all these people going back, and also in poetry, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and to a certain
right.
degree, Tolkien. And
Oh, no, I
certainly,
was gonna say Tolkien,
yeah,
but you're right. I mean, if you kind of look, if you follow that into literature, then that seems very obvious that that's what Tolkien is doing.
and
And yeah, and you
Tolkien,
can then hear it in
right.
these composers, which is super cool.
And Stravinsky's part of a much broader movement that actually Rimsky-Korsakov was. Rimsky-Korsakov wrote, and so they go back into folk tales. They try to
Mhm.
recover. So with Rimsky, it's Scheherazade. because at that time Russia was expanding to like Turk. They were expanding into like the republics in the south, like Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. So there was
Right.
this fascination about the exotic East and with flying
Mhm.
carpets and genies and things like that. So
Right.
Rimsky-Korsakov writes Scheherazade, the Thousand and One Arabian Nights. Scheherazade is the woman in the Thousand and One Arabian Nights.
Hmm.
She's the reciter of it. But he's also recovering folk tales like Mlada. And
Right.
you have in the Czech Republic what's Dvorak I think does Rusalka. And maybe we saw that together, you and I, at the Philadelphia Opera Company of
Yes,
Philadelphia.
I think we did. Yeah. Yeah.
Rusalka.
But then back then, I had no comprehension of anything, and I don't know. I'm not. I admire your ability to kind of dig into these. For the longest time, they were just like this mass of notes to me that I couldn't really put together into
Well,
anything
they
that
are kind
made
of a
any
mess of
sense.
notes.
Yeah.
But again, there's this whole, and so that's cool to know about that because then it helps you frame the music. It helps you approach the music slightly differently. Me personally, it's really because when Respighi plays ancient airs and dances, you can really like you can find the original Renaissance tunes that he's based on, and you can tell, oh yeah, he's definitely based on that. And when Ray Vaughan Williams does variations on a theme by Thomas Tallis, you can hear Thomas Tallis. When Stravinsky gets his little fingers all over Russian folk tunes, first off, about I don't know the original folk tunes, but boy, oh boy, if there's a folk tune somewhere in the Rite of Spring, he's definitely putting it through the ringer. He's not playing it straight, I'm guessing. But what do I know? Maybe he
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, no, he is using kind of the simple melody and establishing it, and then moving forward. But I don't know where he recovered that melody from, though. I mean, did he make it up? Did he? Were people actually singing this? Somewhere deep in the Russian countryside. Um, was it passed down to him from his parents? I don't know.
well, they talked about how he lives in a dasha in near the Ukrainian border,
Hmm.
and spent like a lot of time there as a kid. And Michael Tilson Thomas, I think in the episode shows, he finds a folk tale that's pretty much note for note the opening lick of Rite of Spring.
Right. That's right.
And he
Right.
finds that. So it's probably just due more to my ignorance of Russian folk tunes than anything else. But I'm glad you dug it. I'm glad you dug it.
Yeah, I totally did.
It's
I
fun.
totally did. It was worth it. And then I sent you an episode of a podcast about, and it's related, about kind of a musician's perspective on the creation of AI music, and what that really is doing to the mindset of this particular musician. I forget his name.
Adam
You knew
Neely.
his Adam Neely.
Yeah.
Um, really well produced podcast, a video podcast that he does, a series, and it was it was really challenging, and really, I thought, really interesting, kind of what this there are two different pieces of software. Suno, which we talked about with John Weiner, who he's actually working with that company at Berklee College of Music. That would be episode 1 of season 6, I think. We, you know, Weiner was really he was he was talking about how certain timbres of voice can't be replicated with AI. But I think that Neely goes into what is fundamentally more disturbing about the creation of, I don't know what we call it. Um, I don't know what you call it.
AI music.
Music slop. Like is it slop? There's I've come across pieces that are actually really good. Um, and so it there were a number of things that he said that I thought were really interesting. One of which is, if jazz had not been
Right.
invented, could artificial intelligence create jazz? The answer he comes to, of course, is no, because you can't simply say that you can combine ragtime and the blues and then come up with jazz. There's a whole lot more involved in it than that. And I forget, there was another, or like hip hop, that hip hop breaks so many different rules about pop music that AI would not be able to take from its library pre hip hop. the elements that end up becoming hip hop. And so there's a lack of inventiveness in it, but it does create tunes that people think are good enough, are fine. And it's a really challenging watch.
And
Well,
it's the
what did you think?
episode it's Adam Neely, and it's the episode about Suno because he's done a bunch of episodes about AI music generation. So if anybody's listening to this podcast, God forbid, and you wanna go find it, it's the specific episode about where he talks about Suno. Um, there's so many things, and I wrote notes. This is where Jim's heart sings. I wrote notes, and I wrote.
Hmm.
There's so many fascinating ideas in this podcast. But speaking to what you just said, the most fascinating thing is that he came to the same conclusion that you came to 25 years ago. I
Right.
remember talking to you after the Napster apocalypse,
Mm.
and I said to you, "What do you think this means?" And you said, I think it's just the fact that musicians will no longer be able to make a living on their recorded music. And I was like, "Ha, ha, 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 ha. Yeah, right. Dude, you wake up, grow up and plug in and stuff like that." But you're absolutely right. And that's the and I about 10 years later I came to see what you're saying and I agreed with it, which is that, and that's what Neely says, is that recorded music as a individual artistic endeavor is done for the time being, and that live performance is the only thing that will matter, which sort of echoes what I think, but I feel it's much broader than that, which is my
Hmm.
attitude when I go on the internet now is that everything's fake. When I go to
Right.
YouTube or anything like that, I assume that everything's fake. And there's and the things that I watch are the things that I don't care if they're fake or not, because I just want my brain to go into idle for 20 minutes.
Mm.
But if it's something important and I see a video about it, I generally skip them now. I really do, unless it's a really well-known name. But those names will disappear over time. At some point, PBS will stop, we'll eventually completely defund PBS and all those will be gone. And there'll be a slow time. But so the thing is that with music, what he says is that the old, it'll be back to live performance, will be the individual creative endeavor. And I have problems with that, but I don't think it's an unreasonable position.
Well, so recently, I played this weird little venue in Berkeley, California, and the guy who runs it, Ira Marlowe, is also a really good songwriter and really good performer, and he has the sound tuned just right in that little room, and he has a video recorder going throughout the show, and I got video recordings of well, a video recording of the entire show, and I've been releasing them one at a time on YouTube, and they have 15 views, but but it is unquestionably a recording of a live show. I mean, you could not mistake it for anything else. There are no cuts, there are no angles. It is one shot of me playing an entire set. Luckily, the songs in it came out pretty good and but not perfect, right? So, I'm kind of currently I love these, right? It is it's a document of an event and there's an authenticity to it, and there's something about even just the framing of it that looks good and it sounds really good, and I think there's room for that. Yes, this person was there on that date, there were people who saw it, and that person played this and it's a live recording of what they did at that time. It's what Laurie Anderson says about music, is this is the time and this is the record of the time.
Right.
And I think that what AI music may be doing, there will be some musicians who draw back from recording themselves in a way that is perfect because the lead up to AI music has been increasing
Yep.
perfection and in some ways just increasing homogeny,
Yep.
right? Homo, homo,
Homogeneity, I think, is
I forget, I can't
forget it.
even.
You got it. It's the sameness.
Um, homogeny. So let's just use that. So right, when you tune everything perfectly and you quantize every beat, and he even says this, Neely says this in the video, you end up with something that it's so close to what AI music does that you
Anyway,
it's like you were asking for it.
well,
You know
that's
what
what
I
I
mean?
the phrase that came to my mind in preparation for this episode was, "We've been boiling this frog for a long time."
Mm-hmm.
This frog was boiling long before but long
Very
before
true.
Suno and large language models. And I felt a little twinge of defensiveness when he pointed a finger at MIDI sequencing. I never thought of MIDI sequencing as an antagonistic technology, but I guess it is. But yeah, compressors and plugins and
Mm-hmm.
ever larger studios and pop filters and editing and more editing and then sonic maximizers and
Yep.
spectral analyzers and phase
Mm-hmm.
shift analyzers and la 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 la.
Mastering so that the volume is, at the highest possible level throughout the
Right,
record because radio demanded it and then radio disappeared, but we just were used to that at
right.
that point. Yeah, we've been going in this direction.
Polished.
We
Yeah.
left tape and we ended up in Pro Tools, and then Pro Tools let us do these perfectionist things that, we did them. And
And they're
I
done.
mean, I haven't done them entirely through, and there have been times when I've been polishing that where the band and also Ducky, rest his weary head. Ducky, they would say, "Look, Jim, you're polishing out who you are in this recording." And I've now like just feel strongly about trying to capture something authentic and genuine and not worry about it being perfect anymore because that's what we've lost.
Yeah. The To me, the question is, does anybody want that? But it doesn't. Well, I don't know if it really matters. It's
You
just
know,
it's what
I,
people do.
I
But
saw but I saw this great quote from David Bowie, which is the biggest mistake an artist can make is to worry about what people want. And when you're creating your art, you shouldn't worry. It will destroy your art to worry about what people want.
yeah,
You should make your art regardless of what they want.
as Henry Ford said, if I gave my customers exactly what they wanted, I would have built a faster horse. Um, and he's right, even though he was a prick. But
He was a prick.
well, he wasn't. But
He was a correct prick
He was largely a.
in this one area. Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, so it is. And actually, he's done more videos on the same subject on Suno. So you might find a few videos by Adam Neely about this. And there's UDO and Suno; those are the two. Now we may see, changes are in many ways coming to the whole AI spectrum that will affect this, and and it may be that we will see kind of a lull, uh, because what enables companies like Suno and UDO to do all of this is that the price to do everything is free. And Neely keeps saying, you can do this for almost no money at all. The problem is it's been subsidized up until
Oh
now,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
will not be subsidized really anymore. I mean, as we speak, it's switching over to the actual cost.
Right.
People will have to pay the actual
That's
cost.
why.
So,
Yeah, I'm so glad he. I'm sorry. Did you want to finish that thought? I apologize. I'm just so
mm,
excited.
no, because I'm going to propose what it would cost to make to create an AI a piece of music or like a 3-minute song with AI. I mean, it's an LLM. It's making a prediction as to what the next sound should be, in like the next microsecond, and it just does that until the song is done. Um, we don't. There's no way to find out what the token spend is. We don't know how much inference, which is the decision making process in the data center versus what the training cost versus what the input and output cost is in terms of those are probably small in terms of tokens, but we don't know whether a song costs 10 cents in true cost to make in I don't know what you call that, like in the actual cost in terms of what it costs the company,
Right.
or no, the what it costs like the API call to Claude or to ChatGPT or what are the OpenAI, one of the big companies. How much money are they actually spending on this?
Yeah.
Because we're going to start seeing bills for the actual money that they're spending plus a little bit, so that they can make a profit, so that they don't basically the venture capital money is going to run out. So um, it might cost 10 cents. It might cost
$10.
$10. It might cost $100. It might cost $1,000. We have no idea. So when
Well,
we start to
we
see
do
that, we're
have
going
an
to see a
idea.
lot less of this.
We do
Okay.
have an idea, which is they'll charge as much money as the market will bear. I mean, one of the things I've seen recently, the thing I think find fascinating is that
Yeah.
Uber wiped out all the cab companies, and now Uber costs
Yes.
more than a cab.
Which was the plan with AI, except that it doesn't work the way. I mean, Uber could do that, but AI can't. I mean, I'm sorry, big AI, by which I mean Anthropic, Microsoft. Yeah, Microsoft now has their own model. Anthropic and OpenAI and
Google.
Grok and Meta and Google, right? So they really can't do that because of the scale of it. They're Google is actually looking for investors now, which is I was watching uh, an economic TV show, and they were like, "That doesn't make any sense. Google has more money than anybody. Why would they be asking for money?" It's because they've spent all of these companies have spent just nation-sized amounts of money on this stuff, and they're looking for some way to recoup.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the true cost of these things
They'll
is,
charge what the market will bear.
but the market may not be able to bear the true cost. So
No.
what the market will bear might be, oh, just keep spending $5,000 for every $10 I spend. That's what it's worth. In which case, it's over
Yeah.
until they can figure out a way to do it cheaper.
I think the whole yeah, and one of the things I love, Adam Neely and I really share a lot of DNA. It must be because one of the things he blew up in this app. By the way, this episode I really recommend everybody listen to it because there's about a new concept every 30 seconds.
Yeah,
And
it's
and
amazing.
he really goes through a lot of concepts. One of the ones he says is one of the arguments that Suno makes is that they're breaking down the barriers to access to music. It's like,
Oh God.
kids will be able to do this because right now there's all these barriers to music. And I'm really like, what barriers to music? A harmonica costs like $10. I mean, come on. He says you can take a pencil and bang against a table. You can sing. You need $0. He said, yeah, if you want to play a Stradivarius violin, but there's no barriers to music. There really aren't barriers to music. And the funny thing is that once these AI companies get their claws into you, they're going to start jacking up the price, and then you're going to see a real barrier to entry to make music because
Hmm.
your rich school buddies are going to be making ass kicking tunes, and you're going to be making Mary Had a Little Lamb with your budget program on Chat GPT. It'll be the same thing all over again. And as
It's a
as
little like,
as he said, it's the stupidest idea in the world. If you're really concerned about access to music, how about advocating for a higher minimum wage and subsidized daycare and actually funding music education in our public schools? Isn't that like a better way than spending all this money on AI so people can go in there and create tunes for free? And was that he's just like, that's just stupid. And he's right. I'm glad he just dispelled that entire nonsense.
he deconstructs so many things, but the funniest thing is that the owners of Suno, the creators of Suno, deconstruct themselves. One of them says, "We want to create meaningful consumer experiences."
Consumption.
Oh, consumption
Yeah,
experiences.
meaningful musical consumption experiences.
Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah,
Yeah, and he exposes all of this. I'm really glad he went in. Just like when he went into the whole futurist manifesto by the
yeah.
Marinetti, I think is the guy who wrote the
Yes,
futurist.
yes. When he brings it back, that was
It
beautiful.
almost took my breath away because it was such a brilliant pivot in his thinking. And he's like, we've seen this movie before,
Yep.
and and basically, and it's also very much tied into the other. but we're not going to get time because we're almost at time on this episode. But we're going to do part two because we haven't even gotten to the
Yeah.
Harari thing. Um,
Right. Right.
and there's a
Yeah.
lot of really interesting cross resonances between the Harari talk and what Adam Neely's doing. But fundamentally, the guys running these companies, they're anti-democratic and they have no interest in you. Um,
Yeah.
as long as you just adopt their platform so they can report the user numbers to their investors and get more money. Once they're done with you, they're done with you. We've seen this movie too many times now. We've got a lot of history going back 200 years. We've now seen this movie like 150 times. And I think that's why people are so jaded and so fed up now is that you can't escape. You can't just say, oh, this time it'll be different because it
Right.
hasn't been different for 200 years.
Yeah.
Um,
No, he draws it. The Italian. What was it called? The Italian
the
futurists.
Futurist
Uh,
Manifesto by
Manifesto.
I think it's
Yeah.
Marinetti who did it. And it's
And
just yeah,
it leads directly into the fascist
yes,
movement in Italy. And he minces no words in drawing the connection in terms of fascism and the AI movement now. And he does it in a really interesting and convincing way.
right. Move fast, break things.
Hmm.
That's the Futurist Manifesto.
Right,
Is move
right.
fast and break things. You're not going to eat pasta anymore because it makes you stupid and leaden. You're going to eat rice, which strangely enough, my daughter was telling me about because she just got back from Italy and said one of her classes, the teacher brought this up about how Mussolini tried to get everybody to eat rice instead of pasta. Of course, it failed miserably, thank God.
Right.
And yeah, and it leads into these crazy ideas. It's great when people like he talks about, they're all about cars, and the fast lines and fast cars and the sound and about war. They
Yeah.
glorify violence and they glorify struggle and they glorify war. And it all leads back to the main intellectual taproot of fascism, which was theory of evolution. To a large degree, fascism is sort of an adaptation
Of an interpretation of Darwin,
interpretation of
like,
Darwinism, which is that
yeah,
okay, all this thing about Christian charity and empathy and being nice and culture and God, that's all nonsense. It's just everybody's out for themselves, and the big fish eats the little fish. So guess which one you are? Um,
yeah,
and you see that. You see that with Elon Musk. You see it with all these guys. It's
yeah. Miller, Stephen Miller. I
yeah,
mean, and that's where Yuval
that's where he
Harari
starts.
starts.
That's where
Is
Yuval Harari
yeah,
starts. He starts
yeah,
With Stephen Miller saying, it's a dog eat dog world, and you're a clown if you think that anything but force matters. And Yuval Harari very, very brilliantly and very eloquently shows how that is exactly the opposite of truth.
yeah. Every
Um,
advancement in civilization has been made through force, according to Stephen
Cooperation.
Miller. And Harari is like, actually no, actually no. But I do want to bring up something that is like imprinted in my memory from
Okay.
the time that you and I a long time ago went to Italy together and with my brother,
Hmm.
and we stayed in Vernazza overnight in a pensione, and we met the innkeeper Francesca,
Yep.
who was a comunista, and it was the day that
Berlusconi.
Berlusconi he had won
Right.
the election the first time, and she came down all in red
Yep.
and talked to us about the fascist movement, the new fascist movement in Italy, and her resistance to it. And I remember walking under the train in the tunnel under the train and seeing printed black and huge along the
Bastardi.
wall bastardi.
Bastardi.
And there was just that feeling in that little place in Cinque Terre that things had gone horribly wrong, and that many people knew, that we had seen this before.
Yeah.
The
Well, things changed with the
the
invention of
playboy millionaire,
yeah,
in
things changed
charge.
with the
Yeah,
invention. And this is one of the things I've mentioned before, which is that lots of things don't change. We as human beings don't change. In We change over spans of thousands of years, but we don't really change. And history hasn't really changed. I mean, we still have to get dressed, we still have to eat. There's the rhythm of life is pretty much the same. But one thing has changed. We have cameras and we have perfected the technology of recording and reproducing artifacts. If you go back to like 1400s, there's not a lot of documents. If you want to figure out how like the kingdom of Ferrara was actually operating in 1450, good luck. I mean, there's
Right.
probably some documents, but probably not a hell of a lot. Meanwhile, but once you invent the motion picture, history really changes at that point because it's really hard to rewrite history at that point. It's
And there was that science fiction or fantasy book about, or that we read or almost read. I don't know if we read it or it was a synopsis about how the invention when the first camera
oh
that
yeah, that was
photographed an
yeah,
eclipse
Neil Stevenson.
changed. Right. It. Oh, you're right. That
Dodo.
was it. Yes. We did read this. It just didn't.
Well,
It
I
wasn't a
read
great
half
book,
of
but
it.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. But that whole idea that magic disappeared from the world, but it's not magic. It's mythology.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of harkening back to our discussion about Christ Before Jesus by Jaron Wingo and Matthew. Yeah, always forget his last name. Um, uh, it's he makes a thing about magic, but it's the vagary of
Hand
myth.
waving. Yeah.
Yeah,
But once you invent
that
the
vanishes once there's a
once you
photograph.
have a
Right.
well, it actually begins with the printing press because with the printing
Hmm.
press, you can bang out thousands of books before the police come by and smash the presses. And it's
Right.
really hard to get all the copies of those books back. Whereas if you're talking about manuscripts hand copied by monks, there's only 10. So you can count them on two hands. Oh yeah, we got them all. We got all 10. But when you got a
Right.
printing press, it's like, okay, we think we're not sure how many were published, and maybe there's some out there. And then we get to the digital era and stuff like that. It's just really, you can go back to 1910 and you can have an incredibly good idea of how people were living. You can look at newspapers from 1888, from 1840. You can find out very clearly what people were talking about in 1840 in some part of Holland. So it's really hard now to say, oh, it'll be, this is how it's going to go down. It's like, well, if you look at history, it didn't go down like that at all in any other situation that we're talking about. Every
Yeah.
time we've been through this past, it never worked out the way you said. So, we're kind of fed up with this.
Well, I mean, and just to kind of throw a hard curve in this, based on what you had said earlier, we're heading into an era where we're not sure whether a thing is authentic anymore. So just the photograph, just the video, just the audio recording is not
Right.
enough, right?
That's,
And so
yeah.
authenticity now, of course, will become a new quest uh, by some
Well, that's why
to.
paper, I think, much of the way that Adam Neely talks about the return, the live performance is going to be what people cherish. I hope it's true. I'm not convinced it's true, but
Mhm.
I'm starting to buy more paper books.
Mm,
I find the ebook reading experience pretty unsatisfactory. I don't like it. I like having paper books, and I just bought some today. And you know, it's hard to fake a celluloid film. It's hard to fake a book. It takes a lot more work to do that. That's why. But again, so you have 200 to 300 years. I mean, 1420. The printing press is 1450. So we've had nearly what 500
550.
500
Yeah.
600 years of recorded history. And one of the things I do like about AI, and if you need to get off the mic, let me know. But one of the things
No,
I
no.
do love about AI is that you can take all these newspapers, and you can take all these things that are sitting in dusty piles and scan them in pretty quickly and shove them into an AI and start asking questions about history. Because one of the other problems I have is that when you read a lot of histories, you realize people, when people write a history, they're basically copying another history. They're reading three other histories written by historians and they're
Hmm.
synthesizing. Very few people actually go to like the Krieg's archive of, in Weimar and reading original field reports in German from units, along the Western Front about how many mortar shells they're firing.
Hmm.
But when you do, like the guy that I read who wrote this book, you come up with some really different stories about what was going on in history. And I think it might be really interesting because I think a lot of the stories that we have from history are just, they're heavily mythologized in some cases. I think
Right.
it'd be really interesting if you took this massive data from government bureaucracies and school records and municipal records and logbooks. You don't even have to translate them or type them or anything. You just take pictures, you just shove them into the AI and see what's going on. I'm sorry, I'm really
No, but
wandering.
I agree and I disagree. I mean, I think that the problem with what we currently call AI, and I think that podcast, the Chris Hayes podcast that I sent you, um, with the woman who's, let me just see if I can bring it up without it start playing. I don't want it to play. Timnit Gebru. Uh, she's really good at explaining kind of the problem with all of this. A lot of people, including Chris Hayes himself, says he likes to use AI for research. One of the things, and this actually wasn't her, it was somebody else. Somebody pointed out there's a Russian woman on YouTube who also was an insider who talks a lot about kind of how these mm, LLMs, right, actually work. They when they cite their sources, they're not citing their sources. It's still
They're
just predicting the
fabricating
next word. They fabricate their sources,
it.
meaning they create the thing that is the answer to your question, and then they go and find things that are loosely related to it.
Right.
And if you actually read the article, it may show that the thing that it fabricated or confabulated is just simply not true according to the sources that it
Okay,
cites.
well, scratch that one. But
Well, I don't know that it's scratched that. I mean, I think that we had what the this is not the first iteration, right? And it's maybe not the best idea about creating a machine intelligence. There are better ways. There's world modeling. There's symbolic relationships. It's just much harder to make those. And so we made the easiest one, and we think it can do everything, and it can't really do anything quite. Not 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 well enough for some of us, right?
right. Yeah,
Good enough for some. Maybe to make a pop tune, good enough.
right.
Um, but in terms of like all these other things that we think we can do with it, I mean, it's good. It's good enough for translation. It's good enough for summarizing. Hopefully, I wouldn't rely on anything legal. I wouldn't rely on medical
No,
advice.
no.
It's very faulty, and maybe we'll come up with a better one. That doesn't require that we turn every inch of our land into data centers. But
Good luck with that.
that's not coming anytime soon. That we still have a long way to go with this.
Yeah. So next time I want to talk about the Harari.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to talk about
And
what else do I have in my outline here?
maybe listen. I mean,
I
it
will.
doesn't start quickly, but Timnit is really brilliant. Yeah,
Okay.
that might be
I'll
it.
read
That
that
might be a good
one.
combination.
I also want to read. Do you want to take a crack at the musical human by Spitzer? Are you done with this whole music anthropology shit?
Um,
Is there
was
something?
the musical Human I did actually watch. So we could maybe, yeah, we should talk about
Oh,
that
that
in
interview
relation to
with
these
him
other two things.
that I said was
I
really
think
hand
that was,
waving.
yeah, it was, no, he's sitting
Yeah, with a white on a white piece of
with a white,
paper.
yeah, like
Yeah,
a white piece of rolling
yeah,
photography studio.
yeah.
I did watch that. I have to rewatch that, and I need to rewatch the Harari interview because there's so much that goes on in it. I'll have to take notes because, so yeah, let's tackle these things
Let's do Harari,
when we get
Spitzer,
back.
and Ingrid Turget
Jebru.
Jebru.
Yeah.
I'll 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 massacre the name every single time. Cool. See you then.
All right.
Funny Not Funny is produced by Jim Infantino at Slab Media in Boston. Jim Infantino and Lionel Casson are the co-hosts. Our website is funnynotfunny.net. The theme music is from the song Wheel from the album Utopia Revisited by Jim. The opinions presented by the co-hosts are ridiculous and should not be taken seriously by anyone. Our intended audience is literally nobody. If you're listening to this podcast, you should probably pause to reflect on other choices you've recently made. Please do not subscribe or leave a rating or review. It only encourages us to make more. Thanks for listening.